call the Zoning Commission regular meeting to order on Thursday, June 1st, 2023 at 7 p.m. This meeting is being recorded for transcription purposes, and the written minutes and attachments, if any, will serve as the official record of this meeting. On behalf of our virtual audience, we ask the public joining us in person to approach the podium in the event that they would like to speak. They will need to announce their name and address prior to speaking. Additionally, we ask the audience to save personal conversation for after the meeting, as additional voices cause confusion for those attending virtually. Can I get a roll, please?
Fisher.
Here.
Crowe. Here. Marzullo.
Here.
Manley.
Here.
Engelmann. Here. In the audience are alternates Spellman and Aceto, trustees Augustine, Asherle, and Sweattick, and building inspector Wilson.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the review of the Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes from May 4th, 2023. Does anyone have any suggestions or requested edits?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Moved by Crew, seconded by Engelmann. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes have been approved. The first item of business is our continuation of our discussion regarding some items for term consistency. The first one that we spoke about last meeting was, well, 2 meetings ago now, was floor area versus living space versus living area. I've took what we worked on during our March meeting. I provided each of you with a copy, a working version of the text amendments. And most of it is consistent with what we discussed. The only issue that I had when I actually worked through it and put it to paper is the definition of floor area. So if I'll share my screen and I'll briefly show these definitions, and feel free to stop me if you want to have a more robust discussion on it. I'm going to zoom way in. So at our last meeting, what was the April meeting, excuse me, we spoke about using floor area for businesses, and then living area, living space for residential. And the challenge with that is that in the non-conforming section, they use floor area, and it's a little bit different than how we would use it within the residential district. So as a result of that, I broke floor area into 2 different topics. One is called gross floor area, and you actually saw that already in our code. It was just abbreviated. But the way that I've defined that is total area of the building calculated on a floor by floor basis, enclosed by the outer building's outer walls. This includes basements, porches, garages, breezeways, or terraces. And this is, again, really focused on the non-conforming section of our code, and related to how we calculate things for purposes of a non-conforming building. Go ahead.
Just to clean it up a little bit, perhaps we should take out the word outer before building.
That one?
Yes.
Perfect. And then moving on again in the definitions section, we now have floor area public, which is very consistent, I think, with what the code had already defined as the public floor area, which is the floor area that is accessible to the public after the space occupied by the walls is deducted from the gross floor area. And that pertains predominantly to the business section at this point. Any questions before we move on? So we've removed living space altogether from our text, and we are replacing it with living area, which was used interchangeably with living space before. So the definition is the same. It's just that we've renamed it living area. And then we've referenced, that should say, see in comparison to floor area gross. And floor area public. That's just, again, referring to other sections so that people who are reading our code can quickly identify what items might be related that they want to revisit as part of the definitions. Any questions? Oh, perfect.
I do have one there.
Go ahead.
Where it's saying does not include basements.
Correct.
Should we dive into that a little bit, as far as whether or not it's finished into livable space, or because even though it's below grade in a basement, some of them can be quite livable.
I think that that's a fair question. Why don't we look at the code sections that pertain to living area and then revisit whether we want to make that distinction and say, you know, finished basement space. But prior to this, it did not include the basements. So we'll revisit that. I'll put a little comment here just so that we remember to come back to it. This is, I think, still, it's page 33, which I think is still the definition section of our book. Sorry. It's not 33 of the actual text. Let me zoom. It's page 33, but on the text. Page 20. So here, this is an adult material store. They just used gross public floor area. We've now defined public area versus gross floor area. And I think here they meant public floor area. So it's just the use of those two terms. What does gross public mean? So I've just removed the gross. Same thing with sex shop. You'll see that they just referred to more than 10% of its floor area. Again, I think that was referring to the public floor area in that section. And so it's the same concept, just being very consistent with terms. That pertains to a different portion of the text that we discussed. So I'm going to skip that for now. Same thing with that one. And the R6R1.5 section, which is on page 44 of our book. This will be in both the R1 and the R2. We just replaced floor area requirements with living area requirements because, as you recall, we are using living area for the R1 districts. So I think that it had the same meaning because in that section A, it notes that this does not include garages, basements, breezeways, terraces, porches. So any of that language I removed because it's already defined up above as part of the definition of living area. Mr. Marzullo, just to your point, as we work through this, when you see how they're calculating living area, I don't know that we need to factor in the basement because they're using square footage of the upper floors, not the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just skipped one. Same thing for minimum dwelling size. Again, we're looking at the minimum first floor living area. I believe it just said area before. So again, just to tie it back, it's constituting a living area. So any sort of porches or other items wouldn't count. And I believe that was the intent of this language anyway. The dwelling has to be at least 1,500 square feet in size on the first floor. These are for the R2. Again, it's the same changes that you saw above for the R1 district, just pertaining to the R2 district. We can skip these changes because that pertains to the possible addition of a B4 district. So I'm just going to push through. Again, we'll revisit all of this prior to any text amendment. This is just our first working model for all of this. Oh, that should be the first one. Yes. Let's see, I am on the conditional zoning certificate, chapter 7, page 89. Oh, here we're talking about an outdoor display, and it said 20% of the ground floor area of the principal building. I would interpret that to mean the gross floor area, not necessarily the public floor area.
What, say that again. I'm sorry.
So it currently read, the area of the lot devoted to outdoor display shall not exceed 20% of the ground floor area of the principal building.
Right.
So that could mean public floor area or gross floor area. Remember, public floor area is the amount that the
Right.
public
Right.
has accessible. When I read that, I think that that was more geared towards the gross floor area, not the public, because they did not use public, which is normally what they meant. They stated when they wanted to just count the public portion. So again, I'm not trying to change this language. I'm trying to bring it up to consistency with our terms. Should I say I'm not trying to change the language. I'm not trying to change the meaning of the language. Same thing when we look at supplemental regulations for landscaping materials on page 89. They talked about the floor area of the principal building. I think that they meant the gross floor area as opposed to the public floor area. Senior residential facilities, which is still within chapter 7. This had to do with a senior citizen residential facility with a smaller floor area and less parking than is required for residential dwelling units. Again, I think that they meant gross floor area, since a residential doesn't have a public floor area.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where we really had to start working on incorporating the gross floor area, because it needed to be used for both businesses and residential buildings. And that has to do with chapter 8, page 91. And here we say that no alteration can exceed 10% of the square footage of the gross floor area. And since we are factoring, there might be a slight expansion here, because I don't know how, for these purposes, how porches and those sorts of structures were counted, because this is gross floor area. Now it's gross floor area of the building, but I would argue that this is actually going to allow for a potentially larger addition to a non-conforming building. Can I move on?
I think so.
Same thing with the restoration to a damaged building or structure, again, in the non-conforming section, that we allow them to restore it to the original floor print and gross floor area. Which I think makes sense. If you have a home that had a porch on it before and it was destroyed, you should be able to rebuild as part of your home, the porch.
This should just to clarify, we're just talking about residential at this point now.
I don't think so. Right? This is in the non-conforming building section, so it's not necessarily just residential. I think it would mostly apply to residential, but to the extent that there are non-conforming buildings in the business district, and I'm sure that there are, it would also apply to this.
If it, if they exceed the 2-year window, does that mean that they can't repair it?
That's what that code says. Such restoration shall be completed from the date of the damage or destruction. That's not a modification. That was existing text.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm wondering is, does that make sense to give it a 2-year window? I don't know.
I think there's, if a property has sat vacant for 10 years, should they be able to rebuild the same building? I don't know.
And actually, they don't have to rebuild it. Wouldn't it be, they just get it started? Throw the shovel full of dirt, replace a couple bricks, and we get started.
It says shall be completed.
I understand when I heard you read it, but I've always thought you had to get it started within that 2-year window. You know, when you have questionable fires and things like that, it might take the fire department a year and a half to kind of come to the conclusion that it's not arson or it is arson or whatever it be. And then you got the insurance things coming in there. There's ways where that situations could happen where that can be contested. And I didn't look that up today. I'm sorry, but I thought that we had modified that to construction must begin. Currently, we have.
That's I haven't familiarized myself with this text enough to really have a strong, opinion one way or the other. But you could easily say such restoration must commence or shall commence within the 2 years, and that way it would be very clear that as long as you begin the construction process, probably through the pulling of a permit, and I think a building permit's good for 2 years, that would extend it out to 4 years.
The one thing that's on my mind, and it's a unique case, I guess, is on the corner of 303 and State.
The fire.
That home burnt down. It's been 2 years. Is that now a non-buildable lot?
Inspector Wilson, I don't think that you would treat that as a non-buildable lot, correct? It would just have to make it, it would either have to fit within the current regulations. So your side setbacks would have to work, your front and back setbacks would have to work, or you'd have to go for a variance. And your hardship would be that you have a non-buildable lot. So I think that there's 2 different avenues to proceed. Would that be your understanding?
Yeah, we had a half-acre lot over in Madigan. I called the Medina County Recorder today because we wanted to see when that was deeded. And it was long enough ago that it's a legal non-conforming lot.
Mhm.
And, people ask us, can we tear down a house on a legal non-conforming lot and rebuild? And I believe you can. It's still a legal non-conforming lot.
And that's a non-conforming lot, not a non-conforming building. So this is saying a non-conforming building. If a building's non-conforming, perhaps it's doesn't meet the setback requirements. Then in order to continue to put it in that exact same spot and not meet the setback requirements, you need to do it within 2 years. You can still build on that lot but it would have to then meet the current regulations, such as setback regulations.
But as you point out, you've got the BZA, you have the option of the BZA,
Correct.
consider a hardship,
Correct.
variance for hardship.
Well, do you want to change the language in this one here? To commence within 2 years?
I think it would be fair.
I do too. Insurance can take a year and a half easy.
Yep.
So a 2-year period is,
Also, especially if there's questions about the origin of the fire. or
Right.
whatever.
okay.
Windstorms seem to be pretty cut and dry.
Typically.
Simple enough. Again, relating to the alteration, enlargement, or reconstruction of a building occupied by a non-conforming use on a non-conforming building or non-conforming use of buildings and land, just changing it to gross floor area. I think that that's what was meant by floor area here anyway. It's just that there was no clear definition. Same thing with non-conforming lots in the residential lot section. Section 9.2 parking. This is page 95. This specifies that parking, when parking spaces have to be brought up to code, and it says an existing building is altered and or there's an increase in the number of dwelling units, seating capacity, or I think this means gross floor area, because that's when we want to look at parking is anytime that there's a change in the floor area. Chapter 9.3, this is where we had a definition of floor area. But here for purposes of parking, they say where floor area is designated as the standard for determining parking space requirements. They call it the net floor area that is accessible to the public will be used. That's effectively our definition for public floor area. So when they're referring to floor area within the parking, it's the public floor area.
So you cross that out and correct the public floor area. Okay.
Same thing with seating capacity. When you look at seating capacity, obviously the seats are where there's public accessibility for. So I just adjusted that to say public floor area. Which is, again, I think what it meant anyway, because the definition of floor area for this is right above it, which was net floor area open to the public. That dealt with group homes, so we can skip that for now. And each of these items, wherever it said floor area, has defined above to be net floor area available to the public. I just changed it to public floor area to stay consistent. Here's where you saw they actually used GFA, which means gross floor area, and NFA, which meant net floor area. Based upon our definitions now, I've changed that to say public floor area for retail-based spaces. For shopping centers, I just said 1,000 square feet. If we want to say gross floor area, we can there. I didn't think it was necessary because we don't say that with respect to warehousing. We just say per square, per X square feet. I think it's per 1,000 square feet. So it didn't seem like it needed it there, but you can certainly add gross floor area if you want there. And then again, right here in warehousings where you saw, they just use square foot feet as opposed to gross or public. So I just kept it consistent with that. Questions on that? The parking section. Don't think there's any more parking. Site plan review. This is in section 11.2, which is page 116. This is about expansion of the floor area of a permitted use. I assume they meant gross floor area here. So I just put in gross. And we're back to 16.2, which deals with adult stores and adult material on page 138. Here they refer to the items as gross public floor area. So I just removed gross. It's just the floor area, the public floor area as we've defined it. And that took me back up to the top. So that's all that we've done so far with respect to floor area, living space, and living area. Any concerns on that item? Perfect. So that moves us to group home versus family home versus institution of human care. At our April meeting, we looked at the definitions of our book does not define what an institution of human care is. We looked at some other definitions of institution of human care, and we felt that it was pretty vague, including doctor's offices and any sorts of medical facilities. And so institutions of human care was a conditionally permitted use within our residential districts. So we've decided, at least as of the April meeting, I think the consensus was that we would remove institutions of human care as a conditionally permitted use within the residential district, since it really doesn't fit with what other uses are permitted within the residential districts. Group home versus family home. Group home and family home, first of all, those were also not defined, but we looked at some of the regulations dealing with group homes and family homes, and we removed those as an accessory use. So what we saw from the Fair Housing Act is that we really can't treat group homes different than any other residential facility, residential housing. So to limit where group homes could be or to have any restrictions on them was probably problematic. So we removed group home, family home parking regulations, and we also removed it as an accessory use. So a group home can be anywhere that any other family home could be. We also started to dive into the definition of family, and I think Ms. Engelman did some research on that and sent us some information.
And so did Ms. Crew.
That's correct from
Yeah.
correct. And so if you want to present anything, Ms. Engelman, about your findings, or if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I don't know if anybody has taken the time to read through here, but there's quite a variety of definition of family. Some of them are very quantitative in terms of how many people, and I don't know how easy that is to really track and enforce. But some of the definitions that are more broad in terms of where you have a group of people living together that are maybe that are related by blood, marriage, etc., along with others as well. And so it's very difficult really to quantify. And, who are others? Others could be foster children that you have in your home temporarily. Some of the communities include housekeepers or house nannies as part of the family, especially if they are living there. It's some of these definitions with the opposite ends and try to exclude what was not family. but then, you could come up with a whole exclusionary list and it's easy to miss something. So it's kind of a toss up, I mean, how, when you deal with homes where there are mentally retarded or other types of institution, what we have called institutional homes, those are people that are living together as a quote unquote family. So, but they're not related. So what do all those scenarios have in common? And what I see, at least what they have in common, is that they live as a family unit. And there were some communities that defined a family as those who lived as a family unit, meaning they shared common meals, common, schedules, common areas in the home for the same purposes. So that whether you're related or not, you're kind of behaving as if you are a family unit. And it's kind of hard to define otherwise, so.
I think the group home just had the caveat of there was under the supervision of someone. So there was like a residential person there for supervision of it.
Which would have been why it's an accessory use, because the primary use would be someone's living there that's not part of the group home, I guess is how you would have to.
Right. That was, I think, the only difference that stood out to me for the group home.
Are we trying to micromanage a little bit too much here?
We might be, absolutely.
Maybe.
I think
What is it we don't, what is it we don't want? Let's back up.
Mhm.
That you don't want.
What prompted us to remove it as an accessory use? I understand that the Fair Housing Act, we saw it. Were we challenged on that regulation or anything? It's just, we just decided to undertake it.
Certainly, when we started looking at this, we have group home in our text, we have institution of human care, and we have family home. And what does each one of those mean? And there has to be some distinction between institution of human care and group home, because we had one as an accessory use and one as a conditional use. So it started as a definition. How do we define these things? We have them in our text, but what do they mean? And as that's evolved, we looked at some of the regulations out that exist. And I think that the last, kind of consensus that we arrived at was to remove group home. If we leave group home, I certainly think we somehow need to define it. And I think that that's problematic as well.
Okay, we know we've got these definitions provided with the group home. Now, we'd have to define, we think we should be defining what the term family home means. Is that fair?
I think for our text, family home and group home were one and the same. When you look at, because those appeared predominantly in the parking, and they called it group home / family home. So I think that they were using those synonymously. And then they were using institution of human care to be something different.
I think the group home came into being a number of years ago. We had a situation with the veterans on 130 as a group in a group home. And the feds brought it to the attention by letter, not in person. That you can't do anything. And then so I'm talking about, I think that within the 90s. I just don't remember. I think that's when they inserted that into our code without thinking about, okay, if this is true, then what's this mean now?
I mean, I included, as I was going through it, I included definitions that those other communities have for group home and whatnot. But reading through them, it kind of seems like it's either archaic, that they just haven't updated it, because I think in a lot of cases it wouldn't hold water. But, so, when you look at other sources, it gives you a flavor, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the way we want to go. And I just threw that in there because in the context of how they define family at that time, because they had the other definitions, things get defined contextually.
Right.
and we take away those other things, then you either change the other definition or it goes away or.
Right. We, we could leave group home as an accessory use. Again, I'm not so sure that it holds any water. We don't define what a group home is, but we could leave the text group home as an accessory use and punt it for another day.
I think that term itself is just archaic in the context of like county MRDD. You know, they really try to get away from some of those labels, if you will, because the point is that the residents are no different than other residents in being able to live in a community. And so to distinguish and set that aside, I think is inappropriate.
So are you suggesting using a different term or are you suggesting remove it?
I would suggest removing
I'm looking at it more from the, I guess, kind of a halfway house. I don't know what the appropriate vernacular would be, but is that something that would be considered a group home?
Is it? That's,
Yes. I
Is,
think
is,
so.
is it something that we can't restrict? Is it something we don't want to restrict if we're able to?
the federal protections.
I think if you get involved with federal, state government, who usually are involved in these things. Play the game they-
And I'm not smart on those regulations. I'll be frank with that.
Well, when you say halfway home, what are you speaking of?
Basically, recent parolees, recently released from prison and trying to find a place to get back on their feet.
They are protected.
They are. And so as we're getting into this, I think we need to look at it from every angle, not just altruistic ones.
but I don't know that it's even looking at it from altruistic angles. It's that what can we do within the confines of the
Yeah.
of
What
federal law.
are we allowed to do?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's where we almost went down this path of, do we want to define a family? Because outside of specifying how many people could be in a home, there's very little that we can do because it has to be neutral across all residential homes. It cannot be unique characteristics for protected classes.
And it seems like the only way we'd be able to do that is basically people per square foot.
That's a possibility, but man, that's a lot of regulation.
Yeah.
And there's no enforcement there.
No.
But I think if you define family, there's several of those communities that Cindy identified that have that generic definition of family, just generic, but they have a definition. People who live together, share common space, share common things. If it's going to be defined, I would do something so neutral and generic.
But is it so neutral that it's really not achieving any objective? So what's the objective that's being achieved by just defining family to mean people who sit together at a table and have
Well,
dinner and live in the same household?
We have R1 and R2 family residential, right?
We don't have family, we have residential.
And they're specifically called single-family dwellings.
Right. Yeah, there we go.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
I mean, this one, a group of individuals not necessarily related by blood, marriage, adoption, or guardianship, living together in a dwelling unit as a single housekeeping unit under a common housekeeping management plan based on an intentionally structured relationship providing organization and stability. Or
Yeah, that would be tough. in
I
the-
would say then that kind of precludes having roommates.
Yeah.
There's, if you buy a house and you've got 3-4 guys living together, they're not providing stability for each other.
that's true.
They're providing some financial stability. They're contributing to the
Yeah,
business.
there's some financial.
But again, everyone then, you could argue that anyone is providing some level of stability that lives together.
True.
So that's why I just don't see a reason, our primary objective is to have one single family home per lot, and we're achieving that through other things. I understand the concern of halfway house, but if a halfway house wants to come in, I don't think that our zoning protects that anyway, and I don't think we can protect that. So I don't think that we can ever craft our zoning to necessarily achieve some objective that you want to achieve.
I mean, if those people are living there, not a 23-hour short stay, or, one night or 2 night, but if that is their home, then that is no different than anybody else living in their own home. So.
So I do think with group homes, you could, I believe, limit the number of people based on some kind of square footage if you want to get into that.
But it couldn't be just for group
Might
homes.
stand the test.
Right, it
And
has to-
that that specifically was addressed in those regulations. You
Right.
cannot just have it for a group home. You can specify across R1, X number of people can be in a household per square foot, but it cannot be if you're a group home.
Isolated to a group home.
It has to be the same for everybody.
Has to be the same for everyone.
Yeah, I would not want to define it to any numerical level at all. I think that's just
I think the enforceability of it is next to impossible.
possible, right?
So I guess, where are we on this? Are we, I hear, I think, stronger opinions that we remove group home as a accessory use. So it's just treated like any other residential property? Or do we leave it and not define group home and kick the can down the road?
So by having the regulation, does it cause any damage by having it in there and kicking it down the road?
It causes damage to the person who would want to put in that sort of home. It doesn't cause any damage to,
It has a perception difference. And so I think that's a problem. That's looking at it as on the enforcement side, probably, but it has that perception. Has it been a problem up to now? Probably not,
Unlikely.
but
again, we're going to revisit this later. So do we want to just for now continue to leave it out? It's easy to go back and reinsert it later. if we decide to do that before we move forward with the text amendment.
Well, I think, like Ms. Cruz stated, having that definition in there creates the perception or the argument, if you will, if there should be some issue that, oh, well, you're singling out this class of people. And so if we can't single out that class of people, then why are we? I would feel more comfortable removing it. But like you said, if you want to tag a note so that when it comes time to review, but because I don't think there's really anything that we can do about it, so why call attention to it? It's a historical thing.
And it's an area where the law has relatively recently rapidly evolved. So that's part of why it probably still remains. Okay, so did I just pass it? There it is. I've flagged it within the R1, but we can, the same will be true of the R2. Perfect. Is there anything else with respect to this item or term consistency before we move on to new business?
I would request like a 5-minute break before we go into the new business. That's okay.
Okay.
Can I just ask what, the definition of family that we currently have, we're just gonna keep that in there
What definition are you referring to?
in our current zoning regulation
Which page?
for family. 8, 9, kind of got
Family is defined on page 8.
One or more persons occupying a premise and living as a single housekeeping unit?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy, right? Simple.
Right.
So I like
Say
it. Simple.
anything.
Okay, well, you start out.
I think it's a good
Generic.
observation.
It's generic.
It's generic, right?
Right.
Okay.
Perfect. So I guess we will take a 5-minute recess and resume at 7:53.
That works.
Okay.
Perfect. please?
I'm not physically blind for.
Good. Perfect. All right, I'd like to resume the zoning commission meeting. The next order of business is the review of the conservation developments. This was another topic that was on the list. Would at least like to look at two topics. One is the front yard setback as specified on page 50 of our current text. The minimum setback from a proposed public right of way shall be 30 feet. So homes can be, if a right of way is 15 feet off the road, a home could be 45 feet off the road. And when you look at the newest conservation development, which is Skyland is a 30-foot setback. I also looked at a few of the other conservation developments. Walden is a 50-foot setback. And Wakefield Run, the lower portion is a 75-foot setback and the upper portion is a 20-foot setback. If you've driven through Skyline, one of the concerns that I have in Skyline is the proximity of the homes to the road. It doesn't allow for a lot of safety net, if you will, for young children, anyone running through. There's just not a lot of opportunity for a driver to see them and slow down. And so one of the things that I think that we should discuss is, should we increase that minimum setback from 30 feet to maybe 50 feet? Again, we're not increasing the required lot sizes. In fact, the Skyland development's lot sizes are almost identical to Walden's lot sizes. It's just setting the home further back on the lot. So to encourage a little bit more front yard and take away a little bit from the backyard. Does anyone else have thoughts on that? Again, the other thing to note from Skyland is Skyland has a 20-foot, is it 20-foot road?
I'm not sure.
I think it's 20, because now the township trustees increased it to 22, 24.
24.
So then it was 22 so Skyland's road is a little bit more narrow too when you go through it. So when you're driving through these subdivisions, if you look, Skyland's road is 22 feet. The township trustees have increased that to 24-foot required road width. And then having a larger front yard setback would push those homes even further away from center line. So.
Is there a rear yard setback?
No.
Okay.
I don't think there's a rear yard setback for any of our.
All the other ones have rear yard setbacks.
Do they?
R2 is 15 around and R1 is 30 and 50 on the rear.
Yep.
And
Unless you have the different lot sizes for a 32 or a 3/4 acre lot, it's 15 around.
right.
For 66,000 square foot, it's 15 around. And for whatever reason, for 65,340 square foot, it's 20 and 40. So I didn't understand why a smaller lot has a larger setback than the 66,000 square foot. I think that might be something we want to clear up, but I was looking at, obviously kind of doing a little research on it, and feel like a larger setback in the conservation development makes all the sense in the world with everything else we have set up. And to not have a rear yard setback is kind of surprising.
Well, I know there's, I believe it's a 50-foot setback from the conservation.
100. Or no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking the
Project boundary
boundary.
is
Yeah.
100 foot.
Yep.
I don't know if we've ever had a problem with the rear setback in a conservation, have we? We can certainly incorporate one.
We have a lot of encroachment.
We've had-
Yeah, that's
Encroachment into conservation, but that would pushing the house away from the lot line wouldn't
No,
have any impact on encroachment.
In most of the conservation units. Nah,
They almost all.
there's not a
favor-
ton of them where the homes back up to one another.
No.
So I understand that.
I agree about increasing the setback from 30 to 50.
And I guess my question on the rear yard setback would be accessory buildings in conservation developments. Do they follow the accessory?
When we
Setbacks?
have an accessory building on a conservation, there's a 0 lot line for the rear and 10 foot for the side.
Sides. Right. So that's.
So we
valid
might
point.
need that setback.
Our HOA, which is a conservation HOA, we do have a requirement that they have to be a certain distance away, in part because of the encroachment issues. Because if you put your barn directly on the lot line, there is the potential that they'll want to then cut behind their barn to maintain some space. And so that results in encroachment. So I think that that's a good tie-in to the
Well,
encroachment.
plus we just went through, Bill, I think it was while you were chair that we put a setback on agricultural accessory buildings. It was either a rear or side yard setback.
On
I'm not
agricultural,
on agriculture.
ag, we can't do anything. There's own, the zoning doesn't apply.
Yeah, there's an ag exemption. They
Okay.
it throws our zoning out the window.
So do you think, again, we would be within section 4, add an E? Or actually, we can just say the minimum side yard setback. I think we could just, I'm just looking at how they word it. I don't know that we need. Mr. Missoula, where's one section that we were looking at that has the rear yard?
So it's in a bunch of them. That was one of the things I kind of came up with as well as I was looking through this is it might be worthwhile to just put in a table. But it's in 6R 1.4. It's on page 42 and you have in
There, they refer to it as the minimum rear yard depth.
minimum rear yard depth and then yes, depth.
Okay, because in conservation, they say the minimum side setback as opposed to yard depth. And so that's why I'm just looking at the
Okay.
language. But we can easily say 4E minimum rear yard depth. And do you think it should be the same 10 feet as the side yard?
No, I think the side yard and rear yard should be 15 with, so it brings it in line with some of the other setbacks that we have.
These are for much larger acreage sizes, right?
I mean,
So,
well, one of them's a 3/4 acre lot.
which most conservation developments aren't 3/4.
Okay, and if you put in a 15-yard setback,
That has 15. So you're suggesting a 15 yard?
yeah, on both the rear and the side. I mean,
You're significantly between our 50-foot increase in the front. That's a 20-foot increase, and then a 10-foot on the sides and a 10-foot on the rear. You've significantly changed the envelope, buildable envelope there.
and it's still a very large buildable envelope. And so if we're gonna go with a building width of, let's say, 125 feet, right? You take off the 30 feet, so you're up to 95 feet.
We have
As
one
far as the
home,
width.
we have one home in our subdivision that's maxed out with the 10-foot setbacks. So I wouldn't know. And it's not a huge home when you drive by it. It's just that the way that they had to build it is wide.
Well, I believe the way that it reads, I think it says it kind of funny, but in the conservation district, it said the houses have to be 30 feet apart.
Mhm.
And if you divide that up, it's a 15-foot setback for the house on each,
On each
On
side.
each side.
I'm sorry,
No, on each side.
yeah, on each side.
And I don't know if it just makes sense for uniformity, if we were to put in, all right, in the code, setbacks and size of the lot, all right, rear yard, side yard, front, right of way. And just so that, oh, hey, I've got a 2-acre lot, this is my buildable envelope.
Mhm.
It might be a little bit easier than, I mean, we've got like 8 pages of we have to go through to figure out, all right, which.
Well, in part that has to do with when the lot was deeded.
Kind of, sort of. I mean, what I'm saying is if you just put in like an Excel table that shows the size of the lot. Because it's when the lot was deeded is of like zero significance as to what they're,
He looks at when it's deeded all the time.
okay, but
right?
what does that have to do with their setbacks? Their setbacks are still the same.
Well, I look at that one, to find if it's a legal non-conforming lot.
Yeah.
But I think the problem might be that up until now, Wakefield and Walden, we've set a 10-foot setback. So
Mhm.
if we change it to 15-foot,
All of those become legal non-conforming
well,
buildings.
they'll be there non-conforming, but neighbor Joe's gonna say, well, why can't I put it 10 feet like my neighbor did? I mean, I don't know why the reason we want to change that from 10 to 15.
But you already said that it's already basically a 15-foot setback because they have to be 30 feet apart.
But that's only, so here's how that works though. Let's say one house is not 10 feet in. So this lot was built first in the conservation development. That lot they'll build at minimum of 10 feet. The house that's next to it would have to be 20 feet. Our deed restrictions require that too. So the minimum distance between the homes is 30 feet, but not necessarily every home within there is going to have a 15-foot setback. Because if the one home used, set theirs back 20 feet from the line, the other home is now permitted to be 10 feet from the line.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
That is
But
crazy.
that's how that,
That is crazy.
Which is why it would make sense, especially since really what it comes down to is, all right, I bought this house, I've got this site, and then someone puts it here, and now I got to move my house 10 feet because
no.
they built first.
Right, that's
Well,
that's
that's
basically
true.
true.
It
Right.
is true.
That's basically
true.
what he's saying. So, and that's terrible.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and the other thing you got to think about, there's not many lots left in conservation district. I mean, Skyland's
Today.
sold out. What's that?
Today,
Well, do we have another 100 acres to build another conservation? Maybe. Sure. We'll get some assembling and so forth.
But if you render all of these homes that are not at a 15-foot setback, non-conforming buildings, they're all limited on their expansion of their homes at that point. Every one of them that it does not meet the setback requirements is a non-conforming building. That's correct. And therefore, they can't have any variation that expands their building by more than 10%.
Mhm.
You don't really have a lot of room to play with in these conservation districts because the way, I believe the way the code reads is three houses per acre. So that sets a lot at a third of an acre.
Minimum.
Minimum, of course, yeah.
And
They
so,
wouldn't have much area to build on anyhow, really.
right. And when we're looking at the minimum, the 15-foot is on a 0.75 acre lot.
And I know in Skyland's case, they don't allow outbuildings. So you have to look on the other two. I'm not sure.
Where does it, I'm sorry, I'm not
I
seeing where it
couldn't find
says
it
it's
either.
3 houses per acre.
Okay. I'm not sure either, but this is a sheet that I took off of the site plan. And it shows 3 dwellings per acre. This is on Skyline. And conservation. Somewhere there, I think.
The only place I've seen anything about 3 was actually on the shared driveway.
So I just took the approved site plan and copied off of there today. So I'm not sure.
And you know what, that also could have been something, vestige from previous version of the book. Because after Skyline, we instituted the yield plan,
Well, that's right.
as well as it all had to be accessible from
That's right.
one primary road system.
I can research that and find out where that came up for that site plan. As you know, I don't know.
And to Marcus, to answer your initial question, yeah, I'm fine with saying, hey, let's increase the setback from the road, especially since there is what I think we refer to as the pedestrian circulation system, so the sidewalks. There's always a concern of blinking your eyes and your kids are running down the street, and 20 feet can make a big difference.
And I do also agree with you on the rear yard setback, because I think that, that we do have problems with encroachment. I think that having an accessory building very close to the lot line is problematic, because it does encourage potential encroachment, because many people want to put their building as far back on their lot as possible. And so having some level of setback there, I don't think is problematic. And I also don't think that there's any homes that are built anywhere near the setback line. So we wouldn't have to worry about running afoul of a non-conforming building. I think the idea of a 15-yard setback in principle is a good one. I think that we already have a minimum separation of 30 feet, which effectively creates that same 15-yard setback without changing that language. And that's why for that one, I would just be in favor of maintaining the language of a minimum separation plus a minimum side yard setback. But if we wanted to go to a side yard setback of 15 feet and remove the minimum separation and the minimum side setback, that would be a possibility.
Not that the 5 feet makes that big of a difference. I'm also, now I'm wondering, all right, if people are putting in accessory buildings, are they gonna be 20 feet away from each other? Because they can be. Because the setback, the 30 feet between houses doesn't apply to accessory buildings.
Correct, so the.
So you could
sheds could be
potentially
20
have
feet apart.
2 sheds, 20, which
But is that a
doesn't matter. Yeah. I would be much more interested in the rear yard and the front yard setbacks. Absolutely.
The other notation I had here is something that we could look at while you're continuing to chew on that, is I don't believe that there's a minimum lot width at the street right of way or the building line. And so for other for other sections, there is. Now, perhaps just due to the size of the homes that are going in conservation developments plus the setbacks, we already are inherently getting large enough lot sizes at the front street right away. But it was just something that I noted with respect to the R1 and R2 that is not on the conservation development, if we wanted to look at separation distancing. But again, I think that perhaps that's already achieved.
I mean, I was already kind of toying with the distance from the right of way as well as the street width. And I would not at all be opposed to at least 75 feet street width.
That would be, yeah, every lot's going to be larger than that.
Yep.
Because you figure you have a minimum of a
Well,
10-yard
and then
setback.
of course, we're gonna have to have the arc
And
as
then-
well on a cul-de-sac, but I think to propose at least 75. Because there's just something about me that appreciates the consistency of having each piece named in each section. Like if you look at the sections, we have the building width for the 2 acres, 175. For the 1.5 acres, which is 65,340 square feet, it's 125. But then for the 3/4 acre and the 66,000 square foot lot, there's no building width definition. And I feel like if we've got it defined for 2, why don't we have it defined for 4? And then include conservation district, which is,
I'm okay with potentially for conservation. I don't know if I want to touch lots between 1975 because we would potentially cause some lots to become unbuildable without going through the BZA, because we would need to know what those lots look like to know what the appropriate size would be. Those lots are already set, so
Yep.
we can't, why would you put a minimum of 75 feet now when it's been set anyway?
because when you look at them, they've already got a street width requirement. So unless it comes in triangular and then goes like this,
But what I'm saying is no new
and they
lots
want to
can-
build at the
What-
narrowest point. You don't. I'm just trying to get consistency.
I'm a big fan of consistency.
And I guess that's also, I don't understand specifically the 66,000 square foot lot and the 65,340 foot square lot. The smaller one has a larger setback than the larger one.
I would suspect that it had to do with what the codes were at this time. So what they did is they grandfathered them in. And so what they did not want to do is render a ton of not legal non-conforming buildings. So they were able to, they followed what the code was at that time, and they carved out exceptions. Okay, so what I'll do is, again, just like this time, I'll provide some sample language. What did we want for the, do we have any idea what we want to see for the minimum lot width at street right of way or the building line? 75 is what you mentioned.
We don't need to undertake this if I'm the only one interested. If everyone else is fine with the way it is, I'm fine going with the setback from the right of way.
Front and rear.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If it just seems to be kind of pedantic and unnecessary, then we won't indulge. That's fine.
Well, I found it very interesting listening to what you had to say, and I think it's another way of achieving some separation between parcels.
More than anything, I think what it does is it requires a more uniform parcel size throughout the conservation development. What we've seen in some developments is, all right, well, I'm going to make these lots a lot smaller and this lot much bigger so that I can get more homes in, because if these are all uniform size lots, I'm not going to be able to put as many homes in.
That's all pre-yield plan and pre-maximum
Even
lot size. Because now,
even with a yield plan, though, you can still run into that.
but the largest lot now can be 4 times, no more than 4 times the smallest lot,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
you are bringing
absolutely.
some uniformity
Yep.
to that through
Yeah.
that language.
So I mean, if we're looking at quarter acre lot sizes or third, based on that, then you're looking at a 1.2 acre lot,
Correct.
okay, compared to a third acre lot, or 1 acre compared to a quarter acre.
Or,
And it's-
it would, for the reality is most of these are 0.5 to 0.8 acres. So if the smallest lot's 0.5, the largest one could be 2 acres. That's not a large deviation. Because you figure that some lots might have large riparian setbacks on them. Some might
Mhm.
have ravines on them. So we've got to make sure that that available spacing is there so that they can create those variations as needed to account for the total.
Unless that's not our objective. Unless our objective is to reduce the number of homes that go into the development.
I don't think that will reduce the number of homes.
Well, if everyone can only have, let's say, a half acre lot, because of the setbacks, because of the lot requirements, and then there are riparian setbacks. Now there are going to be areas that are not buildable.
But remember, on a 100-acre parcel,
Mhm.
assuming that the whole 100 acres is buildable, they can have 50 homes. You could argue
Little lower.
a little lower because of roads and whatnot. Let's just say, okay, let's say 45 homes, right?
Sure.
You can cram those in a very small area, which would result in a large amount of conservation space,
Mhm.
or you can spread out those lots. If we're spreading out the lots, you're gonna have less conservation space,
Mhm.
right?
Potential,
You are.
because the yield plan is going to
the
determine,
yield
all
plan
right,
is gonna determine
let's
45
say
homes.
you can get 45 homes in here.
Right.
All right. But then when they put the 45 home plan on a topographical map, they might find, oh, shoot, we can only put in 42.
And that's as a result of the yield plan.
No, that's also a result of having uniform lots on top of it, on top of a topographic overlay.
I don't think you're saying uniform lots. But they have 100 acres to work from. So that
Mhm.
you're suggesting that a large portion of that would be completely undevelopable. Because if 100 acres of that's developable, they'd find the spacing
Mhm.
for 45 lots,
Mhm.
right? So really, it's the yield plan that's going to ultimately dictate what can happen on that conservation level.
Yield plan will determine how many homes can be on that development, not necessarily where the conservation space is.
Correct. But we've now, the yield plan will have said 100, all 100 acres of this is developable.
Mhm.
So you can put your lot, your subdivision anywhere on this 100 acres that you want.
Yep.
I'm confused. So with your version, once the yield plan is set, and even though you've got 100 acres and the entire 100 acres, I'm not saying it's the topo. That would then dictate, because you have
Where
to
the
have
homes
uniform,
go.
right,
Yeah.
because you have to have these uniform sizes. So
But
because of,
remember that all 100 of that, because of the yield plan, we already know that all 100 of that is buildable. So they can put those 45 houses anywhere on that lot, because we've established that whole lot is buildable.
In the notional example, yes.
And if it's not, if only 30 acres of it is developable, then they can put the conservation development anywhere within those 30 acres. But they can then only have 15 homes.
Mhm.
I don't think that changing the lot size is going to have much impact, or setting a very rigid uniformity to these lots is going to have much impact. It's the yield plan that's going to have the impact, because the yield plan is dictating how much of this is developable.
The topography is determining how much of it is developable.
Which then tells you how many homes are available to be built.
Correct.
Correct.
So the yield plan is dictating, all right, this is how many homes you can develop.
Right.
And then the topography, separate from the yield plan, is going to dictate where those homes are located on the plot.
Correct. But to build 30 homes, we have to have 60 acres of developable land. So we know that they're going to be able to fit 30 homes in 60 acres, because we've established that there's 60 acres of developable land,
Yes.
right? So they should be able to get 30 homes regardless of any of our requirements there, because they have 60 acres of available space to fit 30 homes.
They have 60 acres of available space, but it's not necessarily contiguous.
It would have to be, because the yield plan has to say a subdivision could go on this. So it would have to be contiguous. Because remember that for the yield plan, we're going to require them to come in with a development that looks like a subdivision with 2 acre lots, and say, okay, yep, you can build a house here where you show, you can build a house here where you show. But if a subdivision if the topo was all choppy, it wouldn't be a developable 2 acre minimum subdivision.
I don't know that that's entirely true, because you can have riparian areas on 2 acre lots that still give you a buildable envelope,
Certainly.
that when you have a quarter or a half acre lot, you don't necessarily have a buildable envelope in that area.
Then they would just move into a different portion of that 2 acre lot.
There presumably will already be another lot there that is developable, because it is a conservation development. So they're not just going to pick all right, we're going to put one here, we're going to put one here, we're going to put one here. They're all going to be contiguous. And if you can build a 2 acre subdivision with a ton of different,
Why did the conservation development lots have to be contiguous?
because that's how they maximize profit.
That's how they maximize profit, but that doesn't have to be what they do. To maximize
Past
profit, you would
behavior
shrink
is-
the lot to the smallest amount of space is arguably what you do, but almost none of the conservation developments here in Hinckley are the smallest lot possible.
Mhm.
Because from an economic standpoint, it makes more sense for the developers to space out the homes, to create some sort of green space between homes and areas where they feel the need to, or where there's wetlands, to not reduce cost of the development build out to the smallest amount possible. I don't think we've seen a single conservation development where they've attempted to maximize, to reduce the material cost to the lowest possible amount.
Can I go back to something for just a minute?
Yeah.
You were talking about 66,000 square foot and a 65,340 square foot.
Yes, sir.
And the way our code reads, it says 1.5 acre lot equals 66,000 square feet. That's a mathematical error. 1.5 acre lot is 65,340. And I thought we corrected that a couple of years ago, but we must have missed one.
So
that's
I'm
here.
looking at,
You're looking at page 43, right? The minimum lot area is 66,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Page 43.
so 43, it says minimum lot area is 2A, minimum lot area, 66,000 square feet.
Okay, so that.
Then on 44, in 3A, it says minimum lot area, 65,340 square feet.
and
So
that's-
we have both of them still in there.
Well, and the one that's correct is 65,340, because that's, I think we discovered this a couple of years ago, that there was just bad math there. And evidently we missed that one on page 43.
And but it also specifically says lots of record as of November 7th, 1975.
That's correct.
All right, but then the next one is lots of record as of February 11th, 1994. So
That's when the 2 acres came in.
So because there are two different dates, it makes me wonder, all right, do we intentionally have both of these in here?
I
The
absolutely think this is
66 and the
intentional.
65,
Yes.
no, because in 1975, we allowed a 1.5 acre lot. And prior to that, we have some half acre lots, and we have some 3/4 acre lots. But when somebody did the math on 1.5 acres, they called it 66,000 square feet, and that's just, that's incorrect. The math is wrong. And it just may have been an oversight or something.
So as long as we don't have 660 square foot variance in any lots, then we can actually remove that piece.
I believe so.
Okay. Sorry.
So. I own a vacant lot that's 1.5 acres that is a lot of record from 1972. And that 1.5 acres goes to the center of the road. But the code now for that reads not including the center of the road. Is that where the bad math comes in?
I don't think so, because some of our roads go to, some of our lots go to the center and some go to the right way.
If you look
So-
on the engineering website, you'll actually see
If you look where?
on the GIS, the Medina County Engineers website,
Mhm.
you'll see some lots begin at center of road, and those are deeded as center of road, and some lots are off the right of way, and that's
Right.
deeded as the right of way. But that's,
I don't know why they
That
did
just-
that, but I'll check that for you.
Okay.
Tax on it, that's fine. Yeah, I think there was a lot of lots on your road. No. There's only 2, I think. Oh, okay, I thought there were more than that. The first 2.
so I'm not sure
First 3.
where we.
And let's
are with
just,
this
we,
conversation.
I think what we all tend to agree on is let's go with a rear yard and a front yard setback for conservation development.
I would like to see what, unfortunately, we won't know how well our plan takes shape until we see a conservation development come through again, if there are. But I think the yield plan is going to significantly change the look of conservation developments relative to what you see now.
Hmm.
So. So right now, we're just doing a front yard and a rear yard setback. And the rear yard is a 10-foot setback, same as to match the side, or 15?
Well, the other districts are 10 on the rear yard, the other conservation.
I did 30 between parcels,
Correct, I'm talking
So,
about the rear yard.
but I'm saying if.
In
the
which
theoretical-
other district?
Walden and Wakefield are other two conservation.
Okay, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Here's what the effect of that will be, though. The effect is not going to be on the house, it's going to be on a shed. And so you're putting these people's sheds much further forward in their subdivision. Is that the desired outcome or not the desired outcome? To me, I would want my shed back as far as I can away from my home. So creating a 15-yard setback is undesirable compared to a smaller setback. What are we trying to achieve with the rear yard setback? I think we're certainly trying to achieve a prevent encroachment onto conservation land. What else are we trying to achieve with a rear yard setback? And what's the necessary square footage or distance to achieve that?
I would agree with you. I think if the shed is set on the zero outline in the rear, and then behind that is conservation district, people aren't gonna probably, mow behind it, but if you've got 10 or 15 feet, they're gonna keep encroaching. Now, it's not a zoning problem, it's a problem for the people.
so I think you're actually disagreeing with Marcus. Marcus is saying 10 feet is a good and will reduce the encroachment. What you just said is that if it's on the zero, it having no setback will reduce encroachment.
I think you will. But either way, it's not our problem, it's the problem of the people who manage the conservation. I had one on Skyline.
Yes and no.
And I
It
guess
is
I'm
this-
also-
It is, you're correct in that the enforcement has to be on the people who manage the development. But it's also from the township's perspective in the sense that we gave this quid pro quo of, hey, you get this development to be here with these smaller lots because we want to have this protected space.
Correct.
And now we as a township are suffering because someone is cutting some of them protected space. So the township is being affected by the encroachment, even though they're not the ones who are responsible for the enforcement.
I also wonder, and I don't know every lot in all of the conservation developments, but if there are any lots that are back to back.
So you'll see that on corner lots. For instance,
The
our
side
street,
back.
when you have a loop and you have
Mhm.
two, you'll see a corner. I know otherwise we don't have any. Skyland does not have any because they have the green
Except for
space.
maybe a corner lot.
except for corner space. And Wakefield,
And this is
The
what
upper-
we got into when we were talking about the setbacks a couple of years ago. We were talking about, okay, well, if it's right on the lot line, you can have a neighbor that says, no, you can't come onto my lot line or onto my lot to fix your shed because you put it right on the zero lot line. And
I
that's,
withdraw my comment. I think it should be 10 foot.
okay, 50 and 10,
what's 50
50 up front,
and
10 in the back.
Perfect.
I'm fine with that.
That is all that I had for new business this week. I'll provide some language and then move forward with that, and then you guys can review it again in advance of our next meeting. Moving on to the next items of business, I sent each of you a list of the topics to still be discussed. One was conservation developments, which was on this agenda, automobile service stations, nuisances, senior housing, and riparian setbacks are the other ones that I had on that list at this point, as of April, when I sent this list. Are there any topics that people would like to see added to the list? And what is the next topic that you would like to start discussing?
If we don't leave conservation development, there's one item I'd like to add under that topic.
Under conservation development?
Right.
Certainly.
And maybe it's a question first, because I couldn't find it, but you know, when I look at the comprehensive plan, it speaks to the fact that the presence of sanitary and water service is necessary for the construction of conservation development. And I see language regarding sewage disposal under conservation development, but I don't see anything that says that. And it's always talked about that you can't build a conservation development unless there's water and sewer. So I'm curious whether that should be something we look at adding, because, or am I overlooking it somewhere in the conservation development section?
No, I think that the reason that you say that for sewer and water is particularly for sewer, you have to now, through EPA standards, you're required to have a primary septic system and a backup septic site. And so it's not achievable on smaller than 2 acre lots. And so that's where it comes into play.
Yeah, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Same thing's happening on our half acre lots. We had a couple of calls on someone Mattingly. And the guy wanted to buy it and he said, is it a buildable lot? And I said, well, it is for zoning, but call health department. The health department said it's not big enough for a septic system. But they've changed the way they require you to put your septic system in.
And now for some existing lots, though, they will allow what's runoff. So essentially you're not capturing within your soil all of your own sanitary waste. It's being run off onto neighboring properties, but that's changed. And that's why you have to have these large sites now, and you have to have this primary and backup site.
Yeah.
So we could certainly incorporate that language within the conservation element. I'm not opposed to it, but that's where that I think originates.
Well, that paragraph on sewage disposal. I'm just saying that that statement that's in the comprehensive plan that speaks to the presence of sanitary and water service is necessary for the construction of the conservation development. It says that in our comprehensive plan, but our zoning resolution is silent on that. So there's like a disconnect.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, because I remember when Skylar was, I mean, again, you're putting in 1/3 acre lots for the houses that are grouped together, so you're not going to put septic in, so. But I see what you're saying. Should that be incorporated in our language, or?
I'm not
Well,
opposed
I
to
mean,
that. We
it's,
can,
you know, it's always stated, but it's really not, unless it's in our zoning resolution, it's debatable. Let's face it, you know,
No, I think it's a good idea.
so it's a simple sentence that.
yeah, so we can do, yeah, we'll just probably put it on page 52. I'll work on some sample language, and then we can review it next time to water and sewer.
You almost looked it out of the comprehensive plan.
Do you know what page on comprehensive plan?
30.
Thank you. Perfect. So we're back to the list of topics. My thinking was we would go ahead with automobile service station. We've already worked through most of that language. And so I think it should be a relatively easy one to bring back up to speed on.
I don't think, but wait. We already had agreed on everything for the automobile. It went to the trustees.
Correct. And if you
So what-
remember, their discussion at that point was there was twofold. Tire Max was pending, and so they didn't really want to make this change while this Tire Max issue was outstanding. And the second thing was there was the comprehensive audit ongoing at that time. And there was some thoughts that the comprehensive audit would have some impact on this, and so they didn't proceed with that. But both of those things have now been pushed aside. And so I think it's a good time to revisit it. And we can again, start from that same text and look at whether we want to proceed with proposing that same text again or different text. If I remember, Medina Planning Commission did not have negative things to say about that, did they? Or
One
maybe they
person
wanted
had,
minor-
one person had very negative things to say. And she got a whole lot of people on that committee to back off of it.
So we'll pull up the comments from the planning commission, we'll review those and we'll review our taxes.
It's not all captured in the comments.
Well, the comments are the official, so we'll pull it up and we'll see what was said and we'll see if we want to make any adjustments or if we want to advance it as it is. So that'll be the new business for next meeting. I think that will probably fulfill the meeting in its full entirety. A couple other small items. First day school supply. If you remember last year, we granted them, we did a preliminary site plan for them for their new warehouse. We okayed the plan, provided that they had a deed restriction for shared parking. That deed restriction has been reviewed by the prosecutor's office now and approved. And so I'm not sure, Tom, you haven't seen the official recordation of the deed
I'm sorry, what was the question?
for first day school supply.
Yeah.
You have not seen the official recording of
No, I
the
haven't seen it recorded.
the deed. So that will be recorded and then Tom can sign off on the building permits for that plan. We waived the final site plan because it would have been the same as the preliminary site plan. So nothing else to report on first day. Just a reminder that the Northeast Ohio Planning and Zoning Workshop is on 6:30. It's a half a day if anyone wants to attend. If you do, please let, I think it was Suzanne.
Where is that at?
No.
It's at Kent State, at
Kent's-
the hotel.
Yeah.
Marcy Hotel.
Actually, I think it was trustee Augustine requested to let her know. So you can let Suzanne know or.
Suzanne requested. Believe,
Okay.
she sent the email out.
She did. Melissa also sent one to us, the chairs directly to make sure, because they just have to get funding approval, I think, for it. So she wants the trustees have to know before the 6th so that they can put it on their
It's a half day. I'm sorry, was that morning half day? or
morning half
afternoon?
day,
Okay,
morning half day on the 30th.
okay.
The last order of business is, I think you all saw the email regarding the town center project. And again, just the encouragement to consider architectural review standards. I've mentioned it at the January meeting. I mentioned it again at the April meeting. I haven't seen a lot of interest from this committee. I do, quite frankly, think it's going to be probably too late for this project, but certainly willing to. I still am in favor of considering architectural standards if we want to add that to this list of items.
Well, like in January, I suggest we put it on hold and lo and behold, there's actually somebody that's going to build something new in town center, which we have not had that experience. And so I think this is an opportunity to resurrect reviewing architecture and design standards. I don't think they have to be extremely detailed. But I think maybe it's an opportunity to take this individual who has expressed from his emails a desire to work with the township in developing whatever his theme or design is going to be to work together. Maybe it's something that we ought to consider actually moving forward on.
So I am not in favor of the proposal that we work with the developer on it. I'm okay if they were to provide us some language to have discussions just like any other member of the public. But I'm not in favor of having a developer come in and say, hey, this code doesn't work for me, or I'd like to see this work, and then have a developer be present throughout those conversations.
Let me rephrase. I mean, it would be nice to hear what the developer is contemplating. I'm not saying that we're going to say, well, this is what you want to do, so that's how our code is going to be. But I think maybe it's appropriate that we consider putting in some language which gives some parameters and guidelines, whether it's for this individual or for any next endeavor that does establish some boundaries. I mean, I'm not saying we have to go to the detail of I want the specific architectural style, because that could take forever. like that material I passed out.
I think architectural style is the big one. I mean, do you want contemporary look here? Do you want, I think architectural style is the big one.
And I think it might be the
That's-
only one that has real teeth. I don't
You
know what
know.
sort of architectural standards that you would set that would have any level of teeth if you don't
I
have
don't
specific
see why
standards.
we can't get one. We had Richard come and he reviewed everything regarding solar panels, made changes and stuff. He was deeply involved, but I don't know that he necessarily influenced, he certainly didn't influence my vote. I appreciated some of the information he provided. I don't know, right? I can't believe we can't work with this guy at an arm's length. I don't know him, but I would hope he could.
Can I clarify also? Just to clarify, I don't know that I laid it out as clearly as maybe I should have when I forwarded that email to you all. But that was he has asked that we do not call him the developer. Sean Gaffney has requested, he wants this to be a collaboration. So he doesn't need to do that, but he wants this to be a community project where the entire community really feels involved in this project. I suspect, because we have never had anything like this before, that there's going to be a great deal of public interest in this project. So that's why I had suggested work sessions. You don't need to work with him. He doesn't need to work with you. But if you are reviewing this again, it kind of gives you a sounding board. And that is what he's asking for, is the community feedback. And you guys are the zoning commission. You know, this is something that you guys are contemplating. Do we want to discuss this again and put this, maybe put some things down on paper? So that was why I had sent that, so that you guys know what it is that he's asking. He says, what are we looking for style? What are we looking for the facings of the building? Are we looking for siding? Are we looking for stone? The roof pitch, things like that. We don't have to tell him that. He doesn't have to come to us and ask, but in the sense of the community, that's what he's asking, and you guys as a board. So that is why I had suggested possibly a work session with you guys.
Would he be opposed to coming to a meeting, a public meeting, like the regular zoning meeting?
No, he's already
Because
said
if
he's
he's-
open.
Willing to come to the meeting, we can just schedule that as one of our topics and have their input. But again, style is huge, what I think is huge. We have a contemporary looking fire station, and yet downtown is Western Reserve. So, it's a consideration. I agree.
Right. I'm right. It'd be nice, number one, to hear what he's contemplating, what he has to say. And he's got a large area and he's thinking multiple buildings. So, is uniformity, in construction a concern? Is that a design standard when buildings are built? There's uniformity, the facing of them is similar. So that even precedes selecting, which style.
I didn't see his renditions. I didn't see the drawings, but
Did he provide any?
I don't know. I thought
Trustee meeting, he did not provide.
Something.
renderings. He just
He
provided
spoke.
He
layouts.
spoke about
He
it.
spoke what he was envisioning, and he spoke of a nature theme, and I don't know what that means. And so, I mean.
Could be a nudist colony.
We already got one.
I don't think he meant that natural.
Yeah, I think he wants to interleave green space, and maybe he wants the buildings to look, stone and wood. I don't know what that means,
When you talk like that, I thought of Hudson. That's Hudson's.
And I believe the renderings that he had in that presentation, those were projects that his architect had done previously. So that's why they had those in the presentation, if I'm remembering that correctly. I don't know that that's what they were thinking for here. I think it was just something to have a vision. I'm a visual person, so I appreciate
I am
it.
too. Mhm. But, so I have no problem with Sean Gaffney coming to a zoning commission, just like any other person of the public. And speaking to us and asking us what we thought and what our opinions are. And I have no,
So.
I welcome
are
that.
you- What I'm hearing from you is actually more like a concept plan. Are you talking about thoughts just related to architecture or what? Because we do have the concept plan process, right? Which is more of a thought of the entire development as a whole.
Right. Well, he's,
From basically what he said in the email was that he wanted our opinion based on, all right, this is how we're gonna get it. Just so we know how to develop it, what we want it to look like as a township.
right.
And wanted all of our feedback on that.
I mean, imagine him coming to a meeting and Michelle, you saying it'd be nice if you could have the influence of Western Reserve. He probably doesn't even know that right now.
Right. Well, that's
And-
what I'm
and
saying. That's
why I'm
what,
asking, are we doing a concept plan review or are we now talking about architect? Are we doing this as a subject matter of architecture? Or are we doing a concept plan review of that property? Because those are two very different topics to me, and I'm okay with either one. But I'm just trying to understand, are we discussing architecture? Is that our topic? Or is our topic a concept plan review of this parcel?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I would-
why would it not be able to be both?
If it's well, for one, there's a concept plan process, and I think that there are fees that are associated with the concept plan process. And that's different. If that's what we're doing, then it should go through the course of a concept plan. It should be a submitted concept plan. The fees should be paid and they should get their time here in front of us as a concept plan. If we're talking about it more generally as we want to see we're discussing architectural standards, let us know what you're thinking of architecture standards, because we're working on this and we're very interested in what, the downtown stakeholders have to say about this. That's not a fee. That's just an open discussion that any citizen can bring to us and we can have an open discussion. And that's why I'm asking, is this a concept plan where we want to have the renderings, we want to
We're
have
probably
all of
too
this,
early
or-
for a concept. I think just like some of the other big projects we've had where they come in front of the entire commission and say, all right, this is what we're thinking about doing with this. Is it your understanding that it fits with what's in the book? Or is there stuff that we have to change? One of the examples, it was the transportation company. They didn't do a concept plan. They came in, they talked to us. Hey, this is what we're thinking about putting on West 130th and 303. Does that fit within what's already in the book? And it was in front of the entire commission and we all just sat there, we debated and we talked about it and said, yeah, actually this does fit. And then ultimately they didn't even get to the concept plan because it didn't work out for them.
Yeah, remember, we're dealing with somebody who lives here in Hinckley.
Mhm.
We're dealing with a quote fellow citizen, if you will.
Even if they didn't live in Hinckley, they own property in Hinckley, they deserve the respect.
Yeah, right. So I don't know why they can't come in here and just have a discussion on that.
But this is different than the site plan.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
not.
Totally
it's,
You guys are just curious what's going on, basically.
Yeah, you might put it that way and hear what he has to say. I'm sure looks like he's played it pretty close to the vest so far. I mean, he just wants to do something. I'm sure he has some kind of an idea.
sure he
Well,
does.
it's crystallized at this point, but and just have a discussion. I think if we gave him 30 minutes, our next meeting even.
Sure. Reach out to him
And
and-
kind of hold it 30 minutes. So then if we wanted to have another, we'd do another.
I mean, this is a public forum. So
Yes,
the
that's
public
correct.
is invited to come to it
Absolutely.
and hear it. But I think if he wants to know, and if Cindy, if this is a perfect opportunity then for us to hear architectural style and to express architectural style, what are we looking for downtown? The Western Reserve is what is prominent, I guess, in the buildings.
So I'm going to characterize this more of a discussion on the property and his vision for the property as opposed
Okay.
to the architectural
Well, that's fine.
standards. Does that sound consistent?
It's a good broad broach topic and it can cover
Perfect,
a lot.
perfect. If there's nothing, I have nothing else, so Ms. Crew,
I don't have anything.
Mr. Marzullo.
I'm good.
Mr. Manley,
Nothing.
Ms. Engelmann,
Nothing.
Mr. Spellman.
I think if a person holding property in this downtown area is willing to come in and discuss and want to work with us, partner with us, fools not to take them up on the offer.
Perfect. Mr. Chairman. Perfect. Inspector Wilson.
I just ask everyone who's sitting here and is in attendance to please sign it.
I think we have signed the paper.
Not you,
Oh, people, thank you.
attendees.
Trustee? Perfect. If there's nothing, oh, members of the public, any comments?
Not about the developer.
Nope, it's open forum now.
Personally, Richard Pearl, King Road, personally, I think it's dangerous to invite any developer to a zoning meeting. But that's just a personal comment. And I just for clarification, the trustees postponed action on the service station definition in 2021. And I think the comprehensive audit did not start until January of 22.
But there was already discussion of it in 2021.
There was.
Can you elaborate on why you think it's a danger? Just out of curiosity, you don't have to, just curious.
I guess one little thing was they were suggesting they wanted to put housing or second floor housing or apartments that is currently against zoning in the downtown area.
Second floor.
Second floor,
Not-
part,
It's conditional.
It's conditional.
It's conditional.
First floor is,
First floor.
for existing.
No. It's
Okay.
conditionally permitted use within.
and first floor is not allowed, correct?
Correct, correct.
And when 350 Hinckley came here to work on the zoning code for solar, we weren't representing anybody or selling anything. We were only trying to develop further the code that was extremely rushed in 6 weeks into our resolution.
I think the similarity is you have an agenda, he has an
Right.
agenda. I think we're big enough to be able to decide.
That's fine.
My general concern is I want to make sure that every resident or stakeholder in Hinckley is afforded the same opportunities. So Mr. Pearl brought forth a proposal. It went through our normal course of business. We evaluated it through our normal course of business, and we just made changes to the text accordingly. What I don't want to do is have a person come in here and say, okay, I want to change this in the book, and then I schedule work sessions to accommodate a much tighter schedule on them that we didn't afford to Mr. Pearl and 350 Hinckley, or to the Rushworths when they wanted the special event language put in because of the noise concerns with the Halloween. I want us to continue our normal course of business in the way it is. And that's why I was so concerned with how we're characterizing and what we're doing, because I don't want to create some difference here that we haven't granted to anyone else that comes before us. So that's always my concern, is just keep consistency, keep fairness, and we shouldn't be challenged. So if there's nothing else, I would like to, can I get a motion to adjourn at 9:00?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marzullo, seconded by Crew. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meetings closed.